Welcome to our ACCE Learning Network Hangout. This is Series 4, Episode 17 for 2014. Hello, Roland.
Hi, Amanda. The place where we connect to network representatives.
Excellent. And as usual, if you're watching us live, you can post a question to the panel by going to todaysmeet.com/ACCELN. And on Twitter, you can use the hashtag ACCLN. And if you're on a train, well, we'll just watch some interesting things along the way. Now, we might actually start with our intros, if that's okay with you, Roland, and we'll do our intros at the end of everyone else's, because we're a bit time restricted with a traveller at the moment. So we're going to go alphabetical order by first name. So we'll start with our very special guest this evening, Kathy. Can you give us a bit of info on who you are and where you're from?
Some days I'm not actually sure who I am, but I definitely know where I'm from. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. It's very hard to give an accurate description of what I do, but I guess the best bit of all is that I'm a teacher and I get to work with children in years 6 through 12, as well as primary school students in a whole bunch of consulting roles. But the wonderful thing that I talk to people about is being really creative with digital devices and understanding ways that we can help our students to really see the things that they've got in their back pockets, and not just for messaging and using the internet, that it's really about producing things and that they're incredibly powerful devices in combination with the power they have as creators. So that's me in a couple of sentences. Does that work for you?
That's pretty good. Awesome. Just like we practiced with our helmets on last night. And we're also joined by the lovely Chris Betcher, another creative soul. And where are you at the moment, Chris?
I'm walking down the stairs at Revesby Railway Station.
Nice.
So I'm coming to you from a 4G rich zone. And I've just actually gotten back from Melbourne. I was down there for the day doing some training and consulting on creativity with iPad, strangely enough.
Fantastic.
So I'm looking forward to this discussion. But I am just about to jump on a bike for a couple of minutes and get myself home, and I will join you at the other side on a real computer.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Derek. You're muted, Derek. Please unmute.
Hi, how is everyone?
Hello.
Hello.
We can hear you now. All good.
Glad to be here. Just jumped out of one online session with a group of teachers, excited teachers from Emmanuel Lutheran College and a few other schools that are using Facebook across legal studies, English and science. So, yes, that was good.
That sounds
Glad
fascinating.
to be here.
And what are you watching in the reflection on the TV at the same time?
I think it's The Block.
Excellent. So we can see some construction and reno and personality relationship conflict stuff in the background too. That's my summary of The Block.
My sister actually lives in the street.
Oh, very interesting. And Dr. Zagami, how are you doing?
Hey, good, thanks. I've just finished my lecture for the evening, and here I am with you guys.
Fabulous. Is that an online lecture?
No, that's actually a face-to-face one I do with some international students learning about the wonders of educational research.
Ah, how lovely. I have fond memories of such lectures.
They bring nice food.
Excellent. That's always good.
Oh,
and the lovely Paula.
Favorite foods. Yeah, that's got merit. Got my vote, Jason. I'm Roland Guesthausen, high school teacher and e-learning leader, Victoria, Australia. I'm on the state council from the DLTV, and I brought my craft tonight. And you've heard of fish ties, and this is a giant fish that I made out of kite sailing material. So it doesn't quite fit on camera, but here we go. Sorry. Oh, and the painting behind me too. Yeah, I've got the Star Trek painting hanging behind me. I painted.
I didn't know it was Bring a Prop Day. Maybe I'll show you something fun that I've made later on. And Paula Thomas, welcome.
Unmute. Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay. My name's Paula Thomas, and I live in the gorgeous suburb of West End in Vegas, in Brisbane. So it's a pretty wild and interesting place to be. And I spend my days working with teachers, trying to find really innovative ways and creative ways to use all sorts of web tools and iPads to make their learning amazing. I'm especially interested in students creating their own digital portfolios. But I spent today studying up for my Google Educator exam on Gmail, and wow, was it a hard exam. Luckily I passed, but yeah, that was a real challenge for me.
We'll have to get you talking to Chris Betcher. He's a bit of a Google expert. Not that we are condoning cheating and having the answers. A co-learner in that experience. And I just realised I haven't introduced myself yet, although if you're watching and you've seen it before, you probably know who I am, but I'm Amanda Rablin. I'm an e-learning coordinator in Brisbane, proud QSite member as well. And well, let's get into our discussion. So tonight it will be about workflows, ideas, remixing, exploring important live questions, and that can include what is art really, and are our artworks ever complete?
Yeah, I'm really an arty, crafty person. In fact, I accidentally stumbled into a figure drawing class, Amanda, and I thought it was drawing bowls of fruit until I realised that there was someone sitting naked on a blanket, and that was a real stun for me. I tried to set my easel up in the back corner and was dragged out to the front by the lecturer, and I ended up with something that looked like Michelin Man, I think.
You thought this was an art class and not just the 70s?
I honestly thought it was going to be drawing bowls of fruit. I just wanted to become better at composition for my oil painting, and I was outed. But I tell you what, when you are in that zone and you find it hard to speak, and all of a sudden you have to think, what do people really look like? And at the very last session, I really enjoyed it. I actually swapped places with the model. And she had the last laugh back at me because she just drew my face, which I thought was very cheeky. But it was good. Your last creation, Amanda.
You didn't put that in the script.
No, I didn't.
So, to our topic, obviously we've got the lovely Kathy Hunt with us this evening, and she is certainly an advocate for creativity in the classroom and for using iPads as part of that process. But I wonder, when you're combining an iPad with the creativity of an art room, isn't it going to get really messy? And what's so special about using an iPad for learning in art? What can you do with it?
Yes, so I used to struggle with the idea of technology in the art room because I'm a big fan of the really tactile kind of qualities that come from the traditional mediums, and I've always loved the idea of the art cave and a kind of space in our schools where even just the environment of going into the studio is a really different place for a lot of students. There's a feel when you go into an art room. So computers, sitting desktop type computers at the side of the room and having Photoshop on them wasn't the kind of way of working that I really wanted to be leveraging with my students. And what happens now with the mobile devices that they've got is they've got a really good understanding of how to use some of the tools and functions that are the everyday communication type functions on them, but they're really, strangely, not very knowledgeable about how they can actually generate really exciting content. So when I first got iPads into the classroom, and then was sort of, getting the kids to combine those with their iPhones and the other things that they were bringing to the class, I was worried about water and clay and paint, all of those things together with the technology. But to be honest with you, it just hasn't been an issue at all. Every now and then there's a bit of a smudge on a screen, it wipes off. They're nowhere near as fragile as I thought, and now they're almost invisible too, which is interesting. So students might be doing a drawing, they'll just pick up their iPad, they'll take a photo, they'll keep working, and they're almost unaware that they've just done that with their device. And that's really the goal when I talk to teachers about integrating technology. I think it's not about infusing the subject, possibly not any subject, with technology. It's actually about just creating an environment where students can use the tools that suit the purpose.
So do you have some more examples of how you can get the use of an iPad to work alongside that, I guess, traditional art classroom with the pencils and the paints and all of that as well? You've mentioned photographs. Is there more ways that students can use an iPad?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of what I tend to call creative workflows, but I also sort of use some jazzy terms like, you know, hands-on hybrid ways of working and stuff like that to just try and really verbalize to people what we're doing. But I'm just going to bring up an app here that will kind of show you a little bit more of what I'm talking about. There's a lot of apps that I repurpose for educational things that we've got going on. So in a classroom of Year 9 students where I've got hardly any kids that have ever seen a turning wheel, a throwing wheel for making pottery, and in what used to be quite a dry pottery unit, students can investigate form and function and the idea of what it might be like to actually create a vessel on a turning wheel with this app. And when I show teachers this, a lot of the feedback instantly, just that gut reaction is, oh, that's a really beautiful app. And then the secondary reaction is, but that's not the same as using clay and you know, oh, scary, are you going to suddenly take away my clay and be putting this thing out there in the classroom? And it's absolutely not the case. What ends up happening is that students can investigate a whole variety of shapes that are traditional Greek vessel shapes, and they can really see the idea that a hydria is a vessel that suits, you know, carrying water, and that when you've got oil you want a small vase-like shape at the top. And they can, you know, just instead of looking at those shapes in a book or online, they're actually creating those shapes, sharing them with each other, creating a digital gallery that has a whole collection of these shapes, and the connection that they feel with them is really profound. So it's in no way, shape or form about getting rid of the clay. Yeah. When it comes to creating their own vessel that they have one shot at making in the clay, their understanding is so much further along from the act of using that app for about 20 minutes in that classroom. It's quite incredible. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
I showed that same app today and I got exactly the same question. Oh, does this mean we're not using clay now?
Yeah.
The other aspect of that too is if you're teaching art history, like there's a whole bunch of what do you call them, Kathy? The patterning that you can put on the vase, and you have to earn them. You have to earn enough points to earn them all. But once you've earned them all, you can do some really, like, just from an art history perspective, about comparing sort of Roman patterning to Greek patterning to, you know, Aztec patterning. I think there's some interesting art history lessons in that as well.
Yeah.
And I guess you can't really have a...
Sorry. I was going to say it's really interesting too to provide a choice of prototyping for students, because we often begin tasks in arts learning experiences with sketching, which is wonderful for some students, but for kids who have a technique deficit in that area, it's a roadblock right at step one that prevents them from making something incredible. And they may be a very talented producer in that 3D mode, and yet we're really looking at a very limited sketch and having very little to work with them in terms of creating another iteration with the information we've got there in front of us. So if students can actually use something like this app to prototype a shape and through that and get an entry point into the step 2 and 3 and 4, it's wonderfully liberating for some of them.
Technique deficit, I like that.
Wait till I start the show tunes.
I was going to make a comment. I don't know if the conversation's moved on a bit further than this now, but another benefit I see of that kind of manipulation is with a pottery wheel, it kind of takes a while to master that. And if you've got students kind of turning their vessels straight away, it doesn't always work out how you envisage it in your brain, and you probably can't really have such a space that you have one for everyone. So I think it kind of makes it a bit more accessible and has a bit of that pre-learning kind of context there as well.
And I mean, you couldn't afford the time to actually get kids to make a set of 6 different kinds of Greek vessels, but we know the understanding that comes from actually getting your hands on and doing those things. So it's a nice in between, I guess. And even though the students who make these particular vessels, and I'll just show you a picture of one coming to life here, even though they're actually made in coil, we then have a great opportunity to compare the two different types of making. And with what Chris was talking about before with the designing of the decoration for the vessel, the app actually allows you to choose from different kind of culturally iconic kind of patterns. But if that doesn't suit your purpose, I mean, a quick hack is just to either photocopy the printout of the product on the app and draw on top of it, as this one is, just with pens, or to take the screenshot of the vessel and to actually just digitally draw and paint over the top, so that your design is really complex by the time you get going. And this is kind of, I don't know if you can see that well, but just a little showcase of a very low-level student, and what they've actually been able to produce is pretty amazing from start to finish.
It seems to be that you're almost augmenting the way that we visualize things, and what you've done is you've used the iPad to get over that visualization that you're expecting kids to just do in their heads. It's not unusual to think of being able to work with tools this way. It's difficult sometimes to get those 3D visualizations. It was interesting when I was in America, and the bed and breakfast staying at happened to be an Aztec dig. I know that's hard to explain, but one day I'll fill it in. So Linda and I were sort of watching them clean up these little bits of pottery, and from these small pieces they were trying to explain what the rest of the design looked like. I couldn't quite visualize it till I had a chance to see some of the drawings that they had, and that's how they actually dated the dig, by looking at it. It was having that larger picture that I began to see the object that they were working with. I take it that students might have a particular design idea they want to express, and being able to use a tool like that will let them visualize it, how it would look on a larger scale, on a decoration of a pot. Do you find that
2D to 3D, which is incredibly challenging, and there's other things I use for creating nets like Foldify, where they actually have geometric shapes and basically produce their own kind of origami puppet from a flat shape, which is wonderful. So, but you know, you're talking about the same kind of thing as this as well, where you've got students doing screen printing for the very first time, this incredibly multi-step task that sort of is a completely foreign way of working to them. And the tragedy is, if they print their pineapple upside down, or the word for their name is back the front because the stencil that they made isn't going to function, we don't have time for a do-over. You know, that they may walk away with a wonderful calico bag in this example that they absolutely adore, and I've seen some students with something, you know, for years in their hands that they've made. But for other students, if they stuff it up and walk away having, you know, spent 3 weeks on a project that's an epic fail in their mind, they don't look back and go, yeah, but I learned all this great stuff along the way. There were other, you know, wonderful parts of this task. They walk away and may actually, you know, have an opinion about their whole, I guess, self-worth as an artist. They may be thinking, I just am not a creative person, I am not good at art. They put all that sort of huge stuff on themselves because they didn't, you know, have a super successful screen print. So if you can use an app like this one, for example, this is Andy Warhol DIY, where students can actually go through the process of producing a screen print and seeing what happens when an image goes from positive to negative and things like that. You know, they can work at their own pace with the app to just model that process, and then when it comes time to do it, I just find that they're so much more likely to be successful, and that's what we want. We want to see what they know. We don't want to trick them into making a mistake, and you've got perhaps 30 kids running around with stencils and scalpels and paints. So to be able to do something like that is really empowering for the teacher and the student.
Mm. So true.
We had a bit of a side joke there. Some of us were thinking that you can build collaboration in and use the iPads. With 2 iPads, you can do some block printing.
Oh, nice. Just
do you find that difficult? Because some teachers would be very reluctant to sort of work with this stuff in that environment. Kathy, I imagine that to get over the idea, because learning is messy, and especially the learning that's going to happen in an arts room. How do teachers feel about using iPads and iPhones in the art room?
So the big sell is actually getting it in their hand, because there's sort of 2 sides to it. I absolutely agree that teachers are wary, and for many of us, we've been through the Photoshop era where we've had, you know, 4 to 6 desktops in an art room sitting at the side, and it was very, very difficult to organise a classroom and make use of those things. And for many of us, we felt always behind the eight ball with knowing the ins and outs of that program. You know, booking a lab and taking students over to the Photoshop lab and doing all that sort of stuff felt so separate from the classroom. So the big sell, I think, for teachers is actually when they get these devices in their hand, making them feel comfortable using themselves and then putting their hands on this. And, you know, sort of, I think with art teachers being inherently creative people and knowing it, we're all creative, but most art teachers would also say, yes, I am creative, and the general population doesn't always. If you can get them to see for themselves how creative the device is, they'll bring it into the classroom whether they think it's messy or not. You got to love the device and then they'll use the device.
So how do you help an arts teacher, start out with exploring an iPad and its possibilities? How do you frame it for them?
So usually I begin with two things that are a big hook. The first one is selfies, because our students use selfies so often that for the art teacher, flicking through their camera roll is like viewing just atrocity after atrocity. And at the same time as we're so aware that they're taking these hideous photos and that they are opportunities for learning, we're really excited about the premise that our kids have cameras on them all the time. When I was at school, and I don't consider myself super old, I mean, we were given the role of 24 shots on a film, and that was going to be our whole term's project there in one hit. The SLRs, maybe there was 3 or 4 of them in the school, and they were kept in lock and key. It was a whole term to produce those 24 shots. So art teachers know how exciting and liberating it is to have that camera on you all the time. So I get teachers using their camera effectively, taking selfies, being a kid, snapping stuff off, and really then from all of the work that they generate, starting to use those images as entry points. Once they feel the power of that connected camera to the computer that is going on there in their iPad, I think that's when the possibilities open up. Our kids are willing to take photographs now that it's almost like if they're not taking photographs, the feedback for us as teachers is kind of like, well, they're not super interested. I find even like, just in my classroom when that camera goes up that I know I'm onto something and that there's something of interest there with our kids. And, at the moment when there is so much dialogue about creativity, I think that, we can see that our kids want to produce and have the tools to produce. And so I think we should be really excited as arts educators about the entry points there for us.
Kathy, I'm kind of curious. Is this the end of paper and printing? I did well with 12 photos on my box brownie. I don't see that limitation on the stuff that we're doing now. So does that metaphor now mean that we don't need to engage with paper and clay and printing?
Yeah, the day that we don't have paper in the classroom is the day that I leave that particular classroom. I'm a huge fan of paper, and I probably use more now, to be honest with you, because there's a lot of printing, and that leads to some interesting discussions at times with IT, because going paperless is something that happens when you get wonderful access to technology. But in arts learning, I mean, things are happening like students will be taking photographs of drawings, manipulating them, printing them out, cutting them up, sticking them all back together. I'll just, once again with my little resources here, I'll show you the kind of thing I'm talking about. These are some beautiful oil pastel images that students have created, and because I also love watching them work collaboratively, they've designed this pop-up gallery that's gone on show in the school, but then they've gone to each other's work, and that's a funny meme about collaboration just for reference, but then they've gone to that particular pop-up gallery wall and they've appropriated each other's images so that the successes or failures of that first oil pastel drawing don't impact on the next step of the creative process for them. And taking shots of all of that beautiful colour and texture, the sort of brush strokes that are happening there, leads to some wonderful work that they manipulate. And then by printing these compositions out, these students, the task was to design their own collaborative working groups, and this particular group has created sort of beautiful origami with the sections of abstract shapes that they've got, and yeah, some really powerful stuff going on that's student-centered and of the moment, but at the same time, you think about the skills that have gone on, the transition between mediums and the paper stitch, and that's a big workflow. There's about 15 apps used there, 30 kids, and 3 different points for display even. So really big workflow.
So how do you know then if an artwork is ever finished, if that even is such a thing, and how do you measure that or document that as a teacher? Do you have criteria sheets for the different stages of the workflow, or how do you deal with that?
I love those questions from non-art teachers.
Yeah. Well, maybe, Chris, I've been doing a lot of talking. Do you want to hit on this? And if you don't mention Grant Wiggins, I will jump in.
No, I'm happy for you to continue on. I'm enjoying listening.
You know, I think that the assessment issue is always an interesting one, as Chris says, for non-art teachers. You know, just like every other subject, we definitely have a criteria. I really like negotiating that with the students, even when they build a task like this particular one. Understanding the criteria is obviously really, really important, so that they don't just produce wonderful work, but they're also getting the results that they want to. I mean, these are Year 9 students, so in this particular group. But at the end of the day, a creative process isn't a linear one. I always think of the creative process like a circle, which fits really nicely with an inquiry model of learning. Most of the time, you can sort of have a dialogue with people and talk inquiry model and sort of get there, where, you know, you can jump in and out at different times, and the end really depends on so much in terms of the students' understanding of what they're doing. So where they choose to stop is actually hugely important to the way that we can assess what their level of understanding is. That resolution, very, very important.
It's interesting that I feel like art teachers are far more comfortable with the idea of a qualitative assessment, whereas I know a lot of other teachers who always want to quantify everything. They always want to have something you can measure, something you can sort of have a benchmark on. And I don't know, I feel far more comfortable, because I was an ex-art teacher as well, I feel far more comfortable with looking at kids' work and being quite okay about having a qualitative approach to it and being able to value it on sometimes criteria that's hard to measure.
So is there a first?
So you can always check whether you're on the money too, because if the student's self-assessment isn't matching yours, then there's obviously a problem with their understanding of the assessment too, which is, you know, hugely important. So I think that most of the time my students, because of the depth of engagement that they're getting with the task and building their own way of responding to the initial task, so that you can't separate the criteria and the assessment from the task, because it's built together. It's not one thing being pulled out at the end, and it's certainly not just a sheet that it's you know, designing tasks that actually have the assessment built into them as a natural part of the creative workflow.
So, Kathy, can you give us an example of how you frame a task?
Well, it would depend. I mean, apart from anything else, I have 6 to 12, so it's pretty diverse and going all the way down to prep at different times. But as far as like for our conversation today, I guess a couple of things I really like talking about. Sometimes I like to float an app and even just let the kids explore that app and see what they can get out of it. Other times I do things that almost look mathematical, where I put up on the board different apps and then connections between them and other blanks, and they can fill in the blanks to design something. Like we might be talking about designing a pot, and I might be showing them the different apps in combination, but then leaving the way that that actually unfolds to them. Sometimes it's a problem to be solved, so it might be that, you know, using the kaleidoscope idea that you've just seen. It might be that students are actually making materials, looking through actual kaleidoscopes, old school kaleidoscopes, and even working with Escher and tessellations and things like that, and sort of those are all points in time along the way with smaller works, and they develop into something big towards the end. I think one of the great things about workflows is that they can be very, very small or very, very large. So the oil pastel drawings that you saw develop into those big collaborative works, I mean, that was 6 weeks of work. Other times I might, be able to do 3 different techniques in one lesson, and it's very much standalone. So it's a lot of hard work, I think, doing the big ones. I just want to make that point, that it's, if you try and do that kind of thing all the time, you'll really wear yourself out. So from a practical point of view, I'll often have the different classes that I'm working with at different points in that ride. So if I'm working on something really big with my year 9s, then maybe year 6 will be working on something that's a little bit easier to manage and rotating that through the term.
Nice.
That's fascinating, and I think I've totally underestimated what art teachers are able to do with this technology. And is that perhaps a problem in that you have to communicate that approach to teachers, that they don't have that qualitative, holistic, journey-driven way that art teachers think, that they're outcomes-driven?
The biggest problem that I see when I'm talking to teachers is just that if they're not using the device themselves and they don't have access to it, they don't magically just find this stuff out. And even when they have the devices, until they make connections between the different apps that they've got and really invest the time and the effort into working out what they can do, everything stays very much like, we're going to do drawing on the iPad today using Sketchbook or something like that, which is a wonderful thing. But, in connection to SAMR, for example, when you look at substitution in the SAMR model, it talks about swapping, one kind of tool for another as having, very little impact on the learning. Whereas, in iPad art making, for example, it completely changes everything. Being able to sketch and draw on an iPad in terms of medium for students, when you look at charcoal or the permanency like of a felt marker compared to the iPad, and then you add in all this other stuff, and it's very hard to talk to people about it. You actually have to show them you're actually using it. Teachers are just not able to magically learn this stuff. I developed a fascination for it myself. It was the second time around, though, because I had an iPad for about a year, and basically I was browsing on the internet with it and answering my emails. And that's all I did with it. And I thought it was great to have a big screen to watch YouTube, and that was really it. And it wasn't until I started looking at a couple of apps for printmaking and stuff like that. Andy Warhol particularly, it's one of my favorites because it's one of my first that I really sort of started to see the possibilities. I'm not sure that even art teachers who are traditionally early adopters because of being artists, I'm not sure that they're getting the right support to learn how to do these things. You really need to be in contact with people that understand how to do it, and they've got to show you. It's challenging.
Kathy, using a tool that can go beyond subject boundaries in terms of creating multiple media or multimedia, have you seen any use of this towards collaborative tasks that involve, say, music teachers and also English or geography or maths?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about it is crossing those borders. I particularly do that in animation, and I find that that's such a fluid medium that people just respond to and understand really quickly. Even people who are really new to the device can understand that stop motion can be used. You can use Lego to explain a mathematical concept, and have Play-Doh that divides into thirds and comes back to a whole, and all of the stuff. Text and images together can be really powerful, particularly for younger students using things like word photo and getting one of the things that I want to do with my daughter at the moment, because she's just in prep, is they use a lot of readers where like every reader is exactly the same. And I understand the reasons for that, but getting students to make books with each other and also talking about the way that books are put together, I think is so important, and those forms of visual communication. So I've been using word photo with her to take photos of objects that start with certain letters and then to produce a book of the alphabet with all the different letters there represented. And, I think just sort of, I'm thinking a lot of the time just understanding that we can create our own content and have the learning embedded in the creating the content, and that content we create needs to be constantly critiqued in terms of visual language and communication. I think all subject areas can really hook into each other in that respect, if that kind of answers your question. I'm also sort of like really interested in them sharing work. When I send out my kids' work over Twitter and through the website, it's so empowering for the kids. I mean, we know it is. All of those conversations, and they do it just well enough to show you, but when they show the world, they do it as best they can. It's really true, but I think for me the bigger thing has been seeing what's come back from people and how inspired they are by our children, and knowing that things happen, like the app designer that created one that I use called Daily Monster. I didn't know it, but he's a very famous artist, and so when I tweeted out our students' work who'd been using Daily Monster, this amazingly generous and exciting person to talk to said, "Can I Skype into your classroom and chat with your kids?" And he was discussing working on the Matrix film, and the students were just like, "This is really happening." A guy who worked on the Matrix is talking about the work we did, and they will never forget that. And from that, another company has contacted us and offered to put our monsters on slides so that we can see our monsters as microscopic little tiny creatures under the microscope, because he saw what I was doing using microscopes with other students connected to the iPads to make art, and just thought maybe they'd be interested in looking at these kids' monsters under the microscopes that this same class is using. It's an amazing way for our students to actually see themselves as creative, understand that others will respond to them even though they're 8 years old, is incredibly powerful.
It's interesting to hear.
Sorry, Jason, go ahead.
That's okay, it was Roland. It's interesting to hear you talk about the mathematics of art, and I know there was something I read in the Age newspaper about the art and movie magic. Quite often artists have to consult with scientists in order to understand something better, like how bubbles actually behave physically, and mathematicians in order to work out how to wrap designs around non-flat objects like a sphere, or perhaps for patterning. I'm interested in that angle of the technology, and it's good to hear you making that connection there. Derek, you had a good question you'd like to ask.
Yeah, Kathy, have you had a chance to engage with local artists in the community to see how that they're warming to this process or approach?
It's, once again, it's very much about showing people and having a dialogue with them to get them excited. As soon as they see, honestly, I think I have the easiest job in the world convincing people, because it's really just a matter of putting it in their hand, giving them some flexible models that they can actually use, and then watching what they do, because the age and quality of the device means that as soon as they've got a little entry point, they go from there. And I haven't had a single person that wasn't a happy customer at the end of having a sit down and talk, or a workshop, or a place to just see the students work. Like, I mean, these are 6-year-olds that can do things like this. This is speaking of, it's 10 minutes after talking about the idea that stop motion is about creating the illusion of movement. 6-year-olds can do this. And it's a 3-second movie that means so much to them. But at the same time, I've been fortunate to work with the State Library and different galleries and stuff, and you'll see 90-year-old men, having the same like facial expression as a 4-year-old.
How's parent reactions been?
always wonderful. The only downside is that a lot of parents comment to me all the time that they can't get them out of their students' hands, and that, you know, it's very much like the device is just constantly with them and is, you know, they're almost like sort of asking for help in terms of trying to get their students to see the device as a creative one rather than one for gaming or for, you know, just watching YouTube, that kind of thing. So I think that we've sort of also got to educate our parents on what it can do, but, you know, when they see these sorts of things, you know, it's pretty exciting for them to know that their students have access to this. And it's a wonderful thing to, relationship-wise, to watch a child create something like that, turn to their parents absolutely glowing and say, I just did that, and have the parent just look at them like, wow, that's amazing. And to provide opportunities for our kids to actually teach their parents how to do those things too is a real joy.
Actually, as a follow-up, I might ask that, what do the students think about this as a tool? I mean, they are consumer devices, and often the applications tend to be driven towards gaming. It's a very different way of using it, Kathy.
I love it because I'm really fed up. It really, you know, my pet hates. I get very annoyed when people say that it's this amazing tool for engagement. I don't see that at all. Kids don't care. It's their iPad. It's their phone. They're not interested in it, you know, per se. It's just what they have on them. It's in their back pocket. So what? But there's a few side issues with that. The first one is you know, taking it away from them and not allowing them to use it like some teachers do. And in art rooms, there are many of those teachers who don't necessarily see that the value in it and aren't allowing them to use it. I think that's a real problem for students. I think that if you don't allow them to use it, in a lot of their eyes, you're taking away something that is their voice to create. So at the same time as you have that, if we expect to roll out the iPads and just have them jumping for joy, I think that's really misguided, because they're just their tools. But they honestly have a very limited understanding of how creative the device can be. It's very rare that I float apps that are specifically for creative purposes and have more than one kid at best in the class actually say, yeah, I've used this one before. But if I can repurpose apps that they are really familiar with, I love using their selfie cams and things like that to make artwork, because the things that they've already got on them, if you can actually get them to re-see those tools as artistic ones, that's a real entry point for them to sort of reevaluate their creative soul, really, to go, oh, I've had students who've been in my art room for years who have had, and I think I've spoken to Chris about this before, but have had incredible photographic displays on Instagram, like thousands of followers and wonderful work on there, and they've never told me, never made the connection between the things that they're doing on Instagram and the arts learning that's occurring at school. It just didn't occur to them that they might actually be related. So making connections with the kids, you know, talking to them about what their devices can do, asking them to push it further, and seeing what the heck they come up with, because it's amazing, is really exciting.
So Paula, I think you had a question around how students document that reflective process to help make those connections. Unmute first.
And not camera. Kath, I was just interested yeah, good, 2 thumbs up. I'm really interested in digital portfolios and how my students document their learning and the process. And I just wondered, with those art and the iterations on apps and then jumping from one app to the other, do you ever sort of combine that into a sort of a documentation, like a portfolio of their artifacts, and also the thinking and the epic fails that happened along the way and how they actually got to the end of their process?
So yes, all the time, and a lot of it is to do with the camera roll. So for example, if you look at, this is from a workshop I was doing yesterday where I was going through a process with a group of teachers. I think we really underestimate some of the tools that are right there staring us in the face. Photographing, like taking a screenshot of that camera roll, provides us with an opportunity to make notes on top of that and to really
Great
unpack. Yeah, like we just don't take enough screenshots. I'm a huge fan of the screenshot in all kinds of different learning. Like, go screenshot. And getting the kids just trained to just continually do that is really, really powerful. But even with things, I mean, you can see, this is probably a better example, see the selfie. So you can really see like how I've gone through, you know, one step and then back 3 and then forwards 5 and then back 3. And you can see that all unfolding. You can see where the colour change. And that's only half the story because there's no discussion there. It's just the images. They've got to add that. But I also love doing things like, especially for the younger students, you know, just to give them an entry point. Like, this is just a visual, but then using Megaphoto, the visuals that they've created, they can put into a movie format. And at the same, like, it's all about creating that richness. So at the same time as they're reflecting, they're producing something, and they're looking after the way that that is also communicating and being presented. Life's too short to have really bad PowerPoints, and to, you know, to create a sketchbook that's a beautiful object is also a waste of time. So there's got to be that balance between something that's useful and practical, but also a strong piece of communication. So one of my favourite ideas in terms of, you know, just communicating things is, firstly, I'll just say digital folios, iMovie is great. I love getting the kids to drop stuff in, being able to put short titles on instead of writing paragraphs. Really nice too, limiting them just to being able to, you know, write down 8 or 10 words in the titles, and using that as like a slide is really good. And at the end, I like sometimes getting them to all leave their iPads out and coming along to each of them and using the speaker for me to put my feedback in at the end. I might take an iMovie, a photo of myself going like that at the end, and then have my feedback as well in this, you know, actually talk over the top at the end. I love doing that, and getting the students to do that to each other's movies is really good. Book Creator is obviously wonderful, and you can just drop the images in even if you don't put any words, so that you've got this publication. Particularly young students love going home and showing mum and dad. I mean, it blows mum and dad away when they see this beautiful book just of all of their artwork in there. But yeah, one of my favourite apps is this one, this Funny Movie Maker, and this is a terrible example because it's just got eyes moving. But you can bring any photograph into this Funny Movie Maker. There's what the app looks like, and it just cuts a big hole in the mouth, and you can speak with your lips into that hole so that you can animate the character. And I love, you know, if they're doing something to do with artists, the artist can actually talk about their work or their process and say, you know, you can have Vincent saying, you know, well, I can see that, I don't know what I'm doing with this accent, by the way, forgive me, culturally in so many ways, but like, you know, you might be saying, I can see that you've looked at Starry Night and you have movement across the, you know, and it's wonderful. So you can have the artist actually doing the reflection. And I've even used it with oral, so that the student has stood up at the front of the class to present an oral on a particular, you know, long dead guy, and there he is to introduce the student. So you might have Frida Kahlo actually stand up and say, you know, my friend is about to talk about my life's work. It's a story that began long ago, and the student might be like, Frida, I thought, you know, I could do the talking. You know, things like, so that when they do the presentation, they're actually straight away engaging with the audience. You know, the interesting thing is it's almost like having a little digital friend there holding your hand. They feel a lot more secure standing up to do a presentation when they've got their mate there on the screen to help them along. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we had some kids recently do a project about Australian Prime Ministers, and they were using that to get the, you know, they had to write out a thing about what the Prime Minister's most famous accomplishments were, and they used the app to be the Prime Minister and tell the audience about it. It's good.
Right. Yeah, so Book Creator, iMovie, using the speaker in iMovie to give them feedback, using the title instead of getting them to write essays so that you can only fit your reflection or your points in the title. Yeah, Funny Movie Maker. It's great. And the screenshot. That's my hot tip. Screenshot. You heard it here first.
Does any of our panel members have any further questions for Kathy before we wrap up?
Who keeps doing that?
Derek's making screenshots.
Yeah. And I must admit, I've sneaked in one or two of mine.
That was
been
the
wonderful.
screenshot cue.
It's not just Kathy, the orange that's annoying.
One of my teachers has a textiles background. Have you got some ideas that I could share with her? Perhaps Rosie does a lot of stuff with needlework and thread and quilting that I could share that using some of the iPads for creating visualizations of larger tapestries or design.
Graph, and it's actually amazing. Amazograph. So you can do tessellations on here, and it shows you, like, it repeats. So as you draw, it repeats across, and you can change the tessellation so you can, get it to. I'm not pushing the right thing because I'm upside down. Symmetry is type. So you can choose the kind of symmetry so that you can work out, you got rotational symmetry and all that kind of stuff. And so what I really want to do, this is so weird that you bring this up, because one of my next projects I actually want to do is to get the students to look at different patterns on tiles, like Portuguese tiles, Islamic tiles, that kind of thing, because they all use connecting patterns, and then to put that onto fabric and to make some clothing, because a lot of kids are really interested in that kind of area, and they're unaware of the design that goes into so many objects. Like, they're sitting on chairs and working at desks, and we take all those things for granted. So I want to use clothes as a bit of an entry point to start a really big workflow, and use an app to print some fabric and stuff. So that's really nice. And iOrnament has a lot of the content built into it in moving pieces, and you can flip tiles and see their effect on symmetry. So Amazograph and iOrnament.
Oh, wonderful. I'll look those up. I'm actually working on a big tapestry at the moment, which is a space-based one, as you can imagine, with lots of planets and stars. And I've got all the fabric and bits and pieces, and looking forward to assembling that one. Thank you.
No worries. But photo booth is really nice too, because you've got all of the reflections. So if you've got something that's representational and you want to change it into a pattern, or, I love going to photo booth, saving, how you can do all those ridiculous faces, like the mirrored faces, make yourself look really fat or really skinny and all of that. If you hold it over something like patterned fabric or patterned paper and you snap off a photo, when you have that photo, you can cut it, repeat it, do all kinds of things with it. So photo booth for symmetries is really fun to play with.
Cool.
Chris, you've been very quiet considering you have that great big microphone. I sort of expect you to say something like really loud, like, good morning Vietnam or something.
I've been there, done that. No, I don't want to interrupt, because I just think the stuff you're telling us is gold. It represents amazing teaching practice and creativity and everything else. And I've told you that before. So,
but the challenge seems to be still, Chris, isn't it, that we need to move the school administration from thinking of it as just this tactile service where they'll draw in pencil or crayon or paint or watercolor. That it has this bridge with the real world, and
that's okay. Like, I have actually discovered some amazing sketching apps on the iPad, and I'm actually really enjoying doing drawings on the iPad, and some of the advantages of working in a digital, platform over paper. I mean, I've spent time at art school. I get it. I know what it's like to work in physical media, but I'm actually really enjoying the advantages of digital media. And I'm not doing the sort of multi-step stuff that Kathy's talking about, where you're going from app to app to app and you're app smashing your way through all these apps. But just sometimes, I'm just enjoying playing with some of these apps that just let you express yourself in a different format. And it's really interesting. I've been using a whole bunch of different sketching apps, and I think Paper by 53, and there's another one, Adobe Sketch, and there's a few I've been playing with. And it's really interesting because as you move from app to app to app, and you look back at this collection of drawings that you've done, and you realize they all have different they're all stylistically different, even though they're all drawn by the same person. And I'm seeing that the app can actually play a large part in the end result as well. That there are certain sort of stylistic.
It's exactly what I was saying about the substitution. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's okay. I'm enjoying exploring the whole substitution thing and seeing how a specific technology, not just the iPad, but it's a specific app, actually impacts upon a drawing style because of the way it makes you use the pens or the way it forces you to use the colors or whatever. It's really interesting. You can spot sketches by certain apps and recognize them instantly. So yeah.
Yeah. I think to the interesting, like there's always going to be, and I think it's the same in any area, but you've always got a whole bunch of different things that you want your students to walk out of the classroom with at the end of the day, and they may not all be doable on the one day, but I think one of the things that I'm trying to do for the greater good with the iPad is to really advocate for the good stuff that's in our subject, because unlike some other subjects where no one questions them being in a curriculum, the arts, I feel like we're always fighting for our position in school. And I'm not just talking about in terms of a hierarchy, I'm talking about existence. People, question all the time what we do. They ask what we do. I've had students' parents in year 11, come to a parent-teacher interview and sit down and say, I don't know what you're going to talk to me about because I don't understand any of this.
Yeah.
I
don't have an artistic bone in my body.
Yeah, or sit down and say to me, look, can you explain to me why my student should do art? That question is a really normal question. It's a part and parcel of being an art teacher. So I think when you do these kinds of workflows where the iPad isn't actually just infusing your task or just, in there just to be a little bit of technology, but when you're actually showing people that these sorts of devices are in their kids' pockets, they can be creative, they can, be like Jason was referencing across all different subjects.
Yeah.
When you see things that you're doing in your class in Word Photo popping up on students' assignments, like the other day I had a set of lungs that was on a student's assignments that was from Word Photo, which they just appropriated from the stuff we were doing in class, and type drawing being used for labeling skeletons and all that sort of stuff. I think, well, it's not just about exhibiting work, it's about actually getting students to be better communicators, have stronger visual literacy, making sure that other subject areas see the input that we're having into their education as a whole, and importantly getting our students to see themselves as really creative people who have the ability to produce exciting things.
Yeah, so true. I think I've said a couple of times that as a technology integrator, I've always found it far more effective instead of trying to go into a maths class and figure out how to integrate technology. I'd rather run a lesson essentially about technology and then figure out how to build maths concepts into that. And it's the same with this. It's not I see this as stuff as not necessarily let's have an art lesson and let's bring the technology in. It's let's explore interesting toys and then bring other lessons in about art and about maths and about science and about poetry and about humanity. Let's bring all that stuff into just these tools and toys of the modern age.
Yeah, and I think too, at the same time, we've just got to also protect the richness of our own subjects to make sure that we're also not,
Kathy,
putting out materials buffets and letting the kids, there's layers to what we're doing, and also that we're not diluting our subject and the experiences that we'll be having, like what we're talking about with the clay. It's not about getting rid of that at all. Yeah, Derek.
Kathy, a bit of a fun question. With the abundance of iPad 1s now and schools asking the questions, what can we do with our 250 iPad 1s? Can someone take them? And could you see some sort of project or some sort of space that you still yet to conquer with the form factor of the iPad and having an abundance of these iPad 1s to be able to create something that's dynamic and whatever?
Not having the camera is a problem.
So I think if we put them all on a wall and had the students design something where they could hack a huge installation of a moving visual arts thing, that would be unreal. But as far as getting them to bring classroom, like it's a disaster. Yeah. I had someone tell me a Kindle was really great if you didn't have books and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it's not my area as far as producing content without the camera. It's very difficult to students to respond to what they're seeing, and I think that's a really big problem, because the camera is not about just recording a landscape. It's about actually interacting with the world around them and seeing what what they can actually do with the things that are there around them. One of the things about Google and the incredible information that if you just push Google Images, and lots of art teachers do this, they say, what would you like to do? Oh, I don't know what to do. Well, push Google Images and have a look at what's out there. It's really dangerous for students to do that, because they often feel absolutely swamped by the amount of wonderful stuff that's out there, and that feeling of, well, what could I possibly contribute? It's all been done before and it's all so good. It is really debilitating for a lot of them. And so getting them to generate and understand that they can generate original starting points and then work through those in a creative process is very much related to that camera, unfortunately. And it'd just be really hard work to constantly be bringing things in all the time. So that immediacy of response. If the iPad 1 is all you've got, that's great, but I won't be swapping 2 for 1 anytime soon, Derek. Sorry. But imagine that interactive, like, kind of display, like a huge big installation of moving screens. Can I sell that to you? That would work.
Yes. That'd be great.
I want to do that.
You want it for your floor, Amanda.
iPads on the floor. That could be interesting. I might need to proof them in resin or something. That may not work. No.
I'm more into the block pressing, where we can carve something into the iPad itself directly and use it to make some silkscreen T-shirts made with a genuine iPad.
Chopping board?
I had a hankering for one of those great big Macs to make a fish tank out of. I saw that on Etsy and thought that was kind of neat. And I've been in a cafe that had, those big coloured Macs, those big coloured ones. They had them as lampshades, and they looked unbelievable. They had the rainbow across the bar of the 6 colours or whatever as huge lampshades.
Actually, I saw a really good design installation, Kathy, that was in the Berlin Museum. It was these beer cans with candles and devices, and they were used to help. The heat from the candle was used to actually turn the digital devices around, so it formed a digital message that was kind of blinking, both on a large format, pixelated, but also in these individual pictures that would rotate around, using the analog candles to kind of drive it with their heat.
Nice. Really nice.
I tweeted the other day that the next person I hear say that the iPad is just a consumption device, not a creative device, you should smack them upside the head, because they're so stupid.
Thank you, Chris. That's true. These tablets.
And then you can photograph the injury and repurpose it as a selfie and put it on Instagram.
That's a good use of the iPad 1.
For me, it's just about even using the camera. Like, a lot of our kids don't actually understand. They say, "Oh, it's a terrible camera." It's not a terrible camera. It's not an SLR. It's a different kind of camera. They just don't know how to use it. They take blurry shots because they don't stop for 2 seconds. They don't know how to touch the screen to change a light reading. They don't know how to use the volume control button to take a photo. If I do a survey in my class of who knows how to do the photograph with the volume button, they're like 2 kids out of the class. They're trying to, like, hold their iPad under their chin so that they can push the white button. I mean, this is where we're at with our students. We talk digital natives all the time. The kids don't know how to focus their iPad camera, people. They're not digital natives. They're just like pushing the buttons. They're not afraid of technology. They're
fearless using it, are they? I mean, teachers are so careful. We're from the the 12-shot Brock's brownie set. I dropped my phone on the way back to the school bus, and it was picked up by some of the students, and then they raced up to the bus. But I didn't just get my phone back. When I was winding back through, I had 100 selfies. I had an interview with the guy who was with a lollipop man at the street crossing. I had pictures of me running up to the bus and from the building. They were quite fearless, and I grabbed it and started using it. Oh, here's your phone, sir.
It does concern me a little, though, that there does seem to be, I won't say we're raising a generation of people like this, but there seems to be more people now who have less concern with quality. You know, kids who look at a photo taken on their iPad and a photo taken on an SLR and they can't tell the difference. Or they listen to, you know, a piece of music, an MP3 file that's had the highs and lows all compressed out of them, and they can't hear that sounds like crap, you know. I hope we're not raising a generation of kids who are indifferent to quality.
I think, though, there's a few really, and it's a great comment, because they're like, you know, we've stopped teaching those things, first of all. I mean, you go into classrooms and you see posters on the wall. Posters are like, you know, pull them down. I'm like this crazy poster lady at school. When I see bad posters, I pull them down and then I go and talk to those students and have like an intervention. It's really embarrassing. I do it in a nice way. I do it with a smile. I'm like, can I just show you your poster about conservation and talk to you about this panda that's like, you know, horribly out of focus in an unbalanced situation here with a font that's entirely inappropriate. You know, Comic Sans really talks about humour, and this poor panda, there's only 4,000 left, and you're using Comic Sans, you know, and you have these conversations. They laugh and they love it, and you give it back to them, and quite often they'll send me something afterwards. You know, and I see the improvement straight away. But a lot of teachers in areas that aren't arts learning areas, they'll set a task like a poster, and they'll never give feedback on the poster. The content, yes, but not the poster as a form of visual communication. I don't hate posters. If people still want to do posters, I think a lot of the time there's much better ways of communicating, but there's still a place for posters. It's not about the poster. It's about the visual literacy that we're not teaching. And when you can take 300 photos, you're going to get one that's good. And so our kids are on their digital devices taking 300 and then going, boom, there's the one that's good. They don't structure their, you know, skill to actually think composition, to take a couple of photos and then choose between each of those as good iterations. So on one level, I think it's just a different way of working and thinking. It might be that we also just need to do a better job of actually all of us in education coming together and really talking about visual communication and literacy rather than separating out literacy into funnels of learning as well, just because, you know, we're doing that everywhere.
It's funny you say that. When my son was younger, he came home from school and he had a project. He had to make a poster for workshop safety in the metalwork room or whatever.
Makes sense. Does he need posters for that? Yeah.
Yeah, so he had to make a poster. So he made this poster, and I went, you know, that's pretty good, but have you thought about this? And maybe we could fix that. And have you thought about what if you reduce the number of colours in it because it's a bit over the top? And yeah, we went through a number of iterations, and eventually he made this poster using Illustrator, and he got very sophisticated, and he really thought about the wording and the visuals, and you know, and I'm there coaching him along, trying to get this visual literacy going. And he produced this fantastic poster. He took it to school, and I said to him a couple of weeks later, "Did you ever get that poster back from the teacher?" He goes, "Yeah, I got 2 out of 10 for it." I went, "What? 2 out of 10? It was fantastic." He goes, "The teacher didn't believe I did it." He said it was too good. So,
well, I think it's that, you know, taking, just for one example, like an app like Telegamy, you've probably all seen that because it's so insanely popular. But, you know, using a little avatar to talk about something, and that something is presented in a photo on the back. You know, the photo choice surely is hugely important. And yet you see people whacking these horrible things behind the Telegamy, and the Telegamy is standing there presenting. And, you know, we've forgotten that you're presenting something, and that something is the photograph. Like, the photo needs to be better. The position of the avatar, if you've got a photograph of something you're presenting and the Telegamy's big bobblehead is taking up, you know, the Ayers Rock, and now you've only got a quarter of poor Ayers Rock, but you've got this massive big Telegamy bobblehead, there's a problem with your piece of visual communication. But, you know, if the teachers aren't seeing it and the students aren't seeing it, then it's snowballing along. So I think it'd be wonderful to see a lot more discussion about visual literacy and producing stronger, you know, communication.
yeah,
Please.
Well, it's been a really interesting night tonight, Amanda. I've so enjoyed some of the different threads, and we could talk about this all night. It's been some lovely discussions on the chat room about blue phases and green phases and art teachers.
Oh, I'm missing all of this. Where is this?
You have to catch up later.
Send you the link.
Oh.
But my question is, how do you rate a student's folio, say if it's at the end of year 12 and it's all done in blue? Is that okay or is that not okay? Because apparently it wasn't, not that I'm bitter.
It's all in blue. You take them aside and you say, well, Amanda.
Really like that was blue. Is this a person? Do I know this person?
Maybe. I don't know.
Straight A, Billy. Blue, straight A.
Okay, done. I'll just revise my year 12 out result then.
That's an awkward silence.
Yeah, I think Amanda just dropped off her microphone. I might pick up the thread from that if you like, Amanda, while she plugs herself back in again with the audio.
Sorry.
How about we have a bit of a closing comment and questions and from each of our guests, and we'll do this from left to right, starting first with Chris.
Oh, I've enjoyed the conversation. I always enjoy listening to Kathy talk. We met last year, and I got to cruise around Hong Kong Harbour while she showed me a whole bunch of really cool stuff on an iPad, and it was just like, yeah, it was one of those nights that you just remember because you learn so much. So I just love hearing the stuff you're doing. It's awe-inspiring.
Thank you. That means so much. Thank you.
And Derek.
Yes, always extremely inspirational, Kathy, with your energy, and I applaud you and hope that that energy can actually just fan out into the community, not just in education, but educating the community as well. I think that's really important.
Thanks, Derek. And Jason.
So, Kathy, where do you see, if you were crystal ball gazing, where do you see art education might go next?
Jason, that's a big question. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go next. I think what I want for it to do, though, is to be much more flexible in terms of I would love to see us stopping so much separation between the 5 learning areas that we call the arts. I think we've got a real problem with that, and some students, who see themselves really working across those different areas are really being left out. But I also think that, as I said before, even in our school system, that we're really putting arts in a different place to some of the other subjects. And if art teachers can advocate for their subject a little bit harder, I mean, I've even heard teachers say when introducing themselves, oh, I'm just an art teacher. I think we've got to be much better at advocating for ourselves in our subject area. And I'd like to hope that with all of the discussion that's surrounding innovation and creativity at the moment, that we can kind of really get the ball rolling, because that's us. That's what we do so well. And class all working on completely individual things and following different directions. It's best practice. There's so much in a good arts classroom that all teachers can learn from, and sharing is caring. We've got to do that a lot better.
Yeah.
You would hope that the arts get included in the creativity agenda.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. And Paula?
Kath, I just want to say thanks very much. I just had a brilliant night. I love all your passion and your creative ideas, and maybe with what's coming in with the middle years curriculum, we can find art as one of the cross-curricular priorities to share across the whole art thing. And let's get together and sort that out.
Yeah.
Thank you,
it's
Paula.
a date.
It's a date. Yeah.
And Kathy, some closing thoughts.
Well, firstly, I love your Star Trek painting. I think that was a winner.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it is? I thought it was a
I made one
Subaru
mistake,
logo.
so I could point it out. Yeah, actually, I had to make a template for this. The thing is to find a piece of acetate big enough to make a template and then to reproduce it.
Like I said, my wardrobe didn't cut it tonight. I feel very fine that you've got props. I mean,
generation of planets, but the stars you don't see because I didn't realise, Chris, I'd picked up the wrong bottle of paint, and they're in fluorescent colours, so you have to turn the lights off, and then the stars come out. But that came up to be a bit of effect, so that was good.
Huh.
Do it.
So we just really need a little folio to really unpack all the learning that went on there for you in the creation of that, and I could respond to that in an iMovie with a speaker function. Yeah, we could do something with this. But no, you know, in closing, thank you so much for having the dialogue. I think it's you know, when we're talking about making a difference, the wonderful thing is that these conversations, like the one that Chris was referencing, it's not a one-way thing. You know, every time I speak to teachers about what they're doing in the art room, I see a child using an app I haven't seen before. Or, you know, it's a wonderful thing. I get pictures of daily monsters sent to me all the time by students who I no longer teach, or a crazy soup can that, you know, some dragon is bursting out of, or a stop motion of a, you know, well, yesterday I had a stop motion of a dinosaur laying an egg, eating it and vomiting it back up. I mean, it's a wonderful world out there when you when you're dealing with iPads, and the bigger picture is always the learning, and one of the big questions that I'll kind of leave it on today is the idea that if teachers can really think about what they want the kids to be walking out the door with each lesson, they won't need to ask what the best app is. They won't need to wonder about what it is they're actually laying down for the kids in that session. If we just are really clear about starting with the learning in our planning, and that needs to start with an understanding of what our students need, then we'll be on the right track with what we're trying to do for them in education. I don't have the big fixes, but the little ones that start in the classroom like that are pretty important.
Kathy, teachers were once happy to add doodles and drawings, and they scribbled in the margins of those photograph templates when they waited near the Gestetner machine, where they'd sort of race off the photograph copies.
I like the smell of that. I put my hand up and be like...
We used to wait. We'd make lots of little doodles and drawings, and we used to be fancy. And we lost it when we switched to Times New Roman printouts, because that computing generation wiped out all of that creativity. It was no longer cool to add your own little characters and animations and annotations. Years ago, I made a caricature holding my first newborn baby just soon after the birth, using an iPad, a Palm Pilot, sorry, and I shared that with my friends, and it was quite a challenge getting it from there to a JPEG to a GIF back then. Everything that you do is packed with fun, and I'm impressed how engaged you are with using those tools. You've shared some really wonderful and innovative ideas, and I have a feeling tonight, Kathy, we're only scratching the surface of what you can do with this technology. In a sense, you're playing with the digital clay of iPad learning, shaping student learning with these new devices. Now, like the monks of old who used to illuminate dusty manuscripts, you know, breathing life into them, colouring them up, you reminded me that we've all got a role as teachers to illuminate the internet and the internet. Thank you, Kathy, for swiping away the dust of stale digital teaching and learning strategies. And I pass to my wonderful co-host, Amanda.
How can I say anything after those profound words of wisdom? Kathy, you always inspire me to look at the world in a different way, and you have lots of creativity, beauty, and randomness, and happiness and fun in the way that you do that. And there's so many of the ideas that you've shared tonight for us to unpack further and play with and get a little messy. I think it's certainly more about more than just using apps or finding the app to solve a solution, but that whole creative, artistic process, and reinvented with that notion of a never-ending workflow. It's like the never-ending story. There's a song for that, but I won't sing it. I love the way you also link between students' cultural expressive experiences like their selfies and remixing and repurposing that and getting them to view it in a whole different way. So making that connection between the real life and how they express themselves as an artist. And I like sorry, I've decided that now you're my official poster and photography reviewer, and I think I need you as my creativity control officer, or CCO. Yeah, I should have thought about that acronym a little bit more. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been awesome. We have another ACCELN broadcast next week, and in our next episode we're planning to explore wearables, wearable technology, and possibilities for learning in everyday life that come from that, and what it means for the future of the classroom. Chris is now showing off an item of wearable tech. Sorry, I think that's on my other hand. So check out our
Android Wear. It's very, very good.
Very nice. So check out our ACCELN Wikispaces for more information in the coming days. And if you're part of our Google Plus ACCE Learning Network community, then you'll get an invite to watch the show. And if you'd like to join our panel in the future, let us know, or even suggest a topic. And remember, you can view all of our past Hangout recordings at acceln.wikispaces.com. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
We look forward to seeing you all then. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.